I'm Jack Bradley in for Steve Lance tonight. The Supreme Court rules to limit the power of judges to issue nationwide injunctions. The case was over a lower court ruling that halted President Trump's executive order to end automatic birthright citizenship. NTD's correspondent Jason Blair has more.
In a 6-3 ruling, the Supreme Court says nationwide injunctions, quote, likely exceed the equitable authority that Congress has given to federal courts. The case is based on a nationwide injunction that stopped President Trump's executive order to stop automatic birthright citizenship. The High Court didn't issue a final ruling on whether that executive order is constitutional. Attorney General Pam Bondi responded, saying, today the Supreme Court instructed district courts to stop the endless barrage of nationwide injunctions against President Trump. This Department of Justice will continue to zealously defend the president's policies and his authority to implement them. J.D. Vance responded by saying, a huge ruling by the Supreme Court smacking down the ridiculous process of nationwide injunctions. Under our system, everyone has to follow the law, including judges. Supreme Court Justice Amy Coney Barrett wrote on behalf of the majority that when a court concludes that the executive branch has acted unlawfully, the answer is not for the court to exceed its power to. Supreme Court Justice Sonia Sotomayor wrote on behalf of the dissenting judges, saying that the court has, quote, abdicated its vital role in fighting for the survival of the nation's democracy. Senator Ted Cruz, chairman of the Federal Courts and Oversight Subcommittee, has expressed concern that certain jurisdictions are purposefully being chosen for cases involving President Trump's actions.
That the number of nationwide injunctions issued in the first 4 months is greater than the entire 20th century and is greater than all of the nationwide injunctions issued against Bush, Obama, and Biden combined.
Senator Sheldon Whitehouse has spoken in favor of the federal courts blocking the president's orders.
He's breaking the law and doing it a lot, and judges are doing their job.
The Supreme Court also stayed any enforcement of Trump's automatic birthright citizenship executive order from taking effect for 30 days. Reporting in Washington, D.C., Jason Blair, NTD News.
President Trump tells NTD that his major win at the Supreme Court will empower Congress and future presidents. He also calls off trade talks with Canada and announces a new timeline for a ceasefire in Gaza. NTD's White House correspondent Iris Tao brings us this report.
The Supreme Court has delivered a monumental victory for the Constitution.
In a major victory for President Trump, the Supreme Court on Friday in a 6-3 ruling limited the ability for lower courts to block President Trump's executive orders. President Trump spending an hour on Friday taking questions from all kinds of reporters in the briefing room and tells NTD that he believes the ruling will give powers back to the Congress and future presidents.
Iris Tao with NTD Research Media with the Epoch Times. Thank you so much for doing this. It's very refreshing for all of us here in this room.
It's refreshing.
Very refreshing. Yes, we have to have this, and
I understand what you mean.
So thank you so much for coming out. Back to the ruling today, if you don't mind. So you have always talked about winning for the American people.
Right.
How do you think today's ruling will enable you to further deliver for American families and workers across the country and move forward?
Well, I think taking power away from these absolutely crazy radical left judges is a tremendous. This is such a big day. Gives power back to people that should have it, including Congress, including the presidency.
While the ruling was given in the case surrounding birthright citizenship, it goes way beyond that. Trump's administration can now properly file to proceed on a number of policies that were also blocked by nationwide injunctions. Attorney General Pam Bondi criticizing those attempts to hinder the administration.
94 districts and 35 out of the 40 opinions with nationwide injunctions came from 5 liberal districts in this country. No longer will we have rogue judges striking down President Trump's policies across the entire nation.
In another development, President Trump on Friday said a potential ceasefire between Israel and Gaza could be possible within the next week. It comes as he cheers the peace agreement between Rwanda and Congo and touts recent achievements.
For a few short months, we've now achieved peace between India and Pakistan, Israel and Iran, and the DRC and Rwanda.
Meanwhile, on trade, President Trump announced on Friday that he's ending all trade talks with Canada. That over Canada's new digital services tax that Trump says is targeting American tech companies. Reporting from the White House, Iris Howe, NTD News.
In addition to handing the president a legal victory in the Birthright Citizenship case, the Supreme Court issued several other major rulings today. Those decisions revolve around LGBT books and children's exposure to adult websites. NTD's David Lamb has the details on those cases and more.
Several major rulings came out of the U.S. Supreme Court on Friday. In Maryland, for religious reasons, parents can opt their young children out of school storybook lessons that promote LGBTQ lifestyles.
Another great decision that came down today, the trans books case, which restores parents' rights to decide their child's education. Seems like a basic idea, but it took the Supreme Court to set the record straight, and we thank them for that. And now that ruling allows parents to opt out.
It was a 6-3 decision that reversed an appeal that claimed a school board's policy didn't infringe on parents' constitutional right to religious exercise.
I think it's a great ruling for parents. It's really a ruling for parents. They lost control of the schools. They lost control of their child. And this is a tremendous victory for parents. And
the Supreme Court also upheld a Texas law that requires age verification to access adult websites. It requires users to present government-issued ID with the aim of blocking minors from explicit content.
I believe it's more than 30% of its content that is pornographic, that they must make a process that the person going on their website to view their website and its content has to prove their age.
In another ruling, the court upheld a provision of the Affordable Care Act that says the structure of the government's Preventive Services Task Force is constitutional, allowing it to continue working. This means that about 150 million people will continue getting free preventive services. In yet another 6-3 decision, the justices ruled that an FCC program that provides telephone and internet services to rural communities and low-income Americans can continue. The Supreme Court said Congress's delegation to the FCC for the program didn't violate the Constitution. David Lamb, NTD News.
We're 1 week away now from July 4th, the target Republican lawmakers and President Trump have set for themselves to pass the One Big Beautiful Bill. How close are Republicans to achieving their goals, and what are Democrats doing in Congress given that they're left out of this reconciliation process? For that, we have our Washington correspondent Luis Eduardo Martinez in studio right now to break down the latest coming from Capitol Hill. Luis, thanks so much for joining us here. I want to get into the latest on Congress right now. So the Senate just voted to pass or deny the War Powers Act, shot down. What does that say about how lawmakers make of the president's strikes on Iran?
Of course, well, you just mentioned that Democrats are left out of the reconciliation process. So these are one of the things that Democrats have been doing to try and push back against Republicans' agenda. In this case, the War Powers Act resolution is a resolution that seeks to limit the president's authority to wage war. In particular, it would have prohibited the president to take any further action on Iran without congressional approval. But the vote just finished some 5 minutes ago, and it was struck down. Party line votes, 53 Republicans voted against it, 47 Democrats supported it. Now, let's remember that the president is the commander-in-chief of the armed forces, but the prerogative to declare war is left for Congress. Now, that is a prerogative that Congress has relinquished for decades now. We know that Biden struck Iraqi militias in Syria and Iraq without congressional approval. Biden also ordered strikes in Libya. And we go back all the way to President George H.W. Bush that actually invaded Panama without congressional approval. So that resolution didn't pass. It's also worth mentioning that on the House side, Congressman Thomas Massie, Republican, wanted to put forth the War Powers Resolution Act on the House side, but he withdrew it once he saw that the ceasefire between Iran and Israel is enduring.
Interesting. All right. So regarding the Senate leadership, the Senate Republicans have been asking to fire the parliamentarian Elizabeth McDonough. Why is that, and what's this position all about?
Okay, so the Senate parliamentarian is an unelected official. It's actually appointed by the Senate Majority Leader, and in her case, her Elizabeth McDonough. Her job is to go over bills to see that they're up to standard with Senate rules, in particular the Byrd rule. Now, the current Senate parliamentarian was appointed by Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid back in 2012, a Democrat. And that's why House Republicans are urging Senate Majority Leader John Thune to fire her and hire a new Senate parliamentarian because this Senate parliamentarian has struck down several provisions that Republicans wanted to see in the reconciliation bill. Like, for example, Republicans wanted to strike the use of Affordable Care Act subsidies for abortions. They also wanted to strike out from the U.S. budget having illegal immigrants have access to Medicare and other benefits, and also have private vouchers for private schools instead of having people only have to opt for the public school system. So all of these things that were already agreed by Republicans and part of their priorities in the reconciliation bill have been struck out by the Senate parliamentarian, which has muddied the waters in this debate that is still ongoing.
And with all these significant holdouts from both the Senate and House, what does the timeline look leading up to July 4th to pass the One Big Beautiful Bill?
Of course, well, now it gets complicated, right? Because July 4th is next Friday, and the bill hasn't even received its first vote on the Senate. So Senate's going to have to work over the weekend, something that senators are not fond of. The earliest vote is expected tomorrow at noon. In the most optimistic case that on Saturday the reconciliation bill is passed, then the House will have 72 hours, which is a courtesy time that usually lawmakers ask to actually review a bill before voting on it, and then voting on it next week before sending it to the president's desk. And it's obviously Republicans' hope that they will be able to send it for signing on July 4th.
All right, well, we'll see if they can do it. Luis Eduardo Martinez, thank you so much.